All right. Welcome, Carson, to the Leaders Who Care series.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Well, you won't have to look forward too long because here we go. You know, people are going to see why you deserve to be on a Leaders Who Care series because you kind of really do care, don't you?
Generally, yeah, I'd like to think that I do.
Okay, well, we'll show them. So, how about if we start is if you could briefly introduce yourself, and I always put an asterisk beside this with men especially, because the majority of men then start telling me what they do in their business and stuff, and that's not really the question. The question is if you can share about where you're from originally, where you are now,
Sure,
um, family, anything you feel comfortable talking about
sure.
family, something you've never told anybody before, you want to reveal now, that's always fun. Around that arena.
Cool. Yeah, so I am currently living in Capitola, California with my wife. I have three daughters. They are 20, 25, and 28. So the last one is junior at UC Santa Barbara and is currently studying in Madrid for the fall semester. She actually FaceTimed me maybe 4 days ago while she and her friends were in Morocco on camels riding through the Sahara. So that was cool.
By the way, I have three boys, and I really am a traditional guy where I think traditions are important, and the gal's parents should pay for all the weddings. It is tradition, right?
Yeah, for sure. We actually were getting jokes too. They did a video log, and one of the guides in Morocco was joking about how, he could give us 50,000 camels or whatever it was, some 5,000 camels, and that we could keep our daughter, keep her there. Similar kind of idea, although I think I'd get a better deal out of that. The camels would be great. Um, no, I'm just kidding.
You just have
Anyway,
you just have to get over the hump.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Nice dad joke. Uh,
Thanks.
yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, so living in Capitola, California, I've lived here now in Santa Cruz broadly for about 30 years. I was brought here to attend the University of California, Santa Cruz, where I studied contemporary German and French philosophy with
Well,
an
we'll get to
emphasis.
that. We'll get to that in a
Oh,
minute.
okay, cool. Anyway,
Um,
studied at UC Santa Cruz. Prior to that, I had been raised in Marin County. Prior to that, I spent some time in Dallas, Texas when my parents got divorced and my mom moved me to Dallas. And prior to that, I was born in Marin. So that's, a bit about me. Something that I haven't told anybody. Gosh, that's a great question. Let me think about that. I'll have to find something good. I can't think of anything that comes to mind.
well, when it comes, you can interject in there. Just
Sure, if it comes up, I'll throw it in.
when,
I have been more recently as a father in the past, 25 or 28 years, deeply involved in um, soccer. So I'm a Division I soccer coach, or was, and ran
nice.
a Division I soccer club for years, and then had a volleyball club that me and a friend of mine and I established, and did that for a number of years. Yeah, done various community things with the school and been on the board for years and so on. So been very active in the area, doing organizing at some level and for kids and also for some political stuff. And yeah, so yeah, that's really
And
about me.
yeah, I think I coached a lot in hockey, and I coached my kids in hockey, and lots of other kids, and there's so much fulfillment, so much learning, so much positive energy, so much everything that you get out of that. It's probably some of the best times I've ever had, and felt good. And you're nodding your head, so I guess you feel the
Oh
same.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing because um, having done the soccer club and the volleyball club and been on the board for this school and all the things that I've done and having three daughters and all of their friends at different ages and so on, I'll now, be in the grocery store or at a restaurant or what have you, and some young adults will, say, "Hey, Carson," or "Coach Carson," or whatever it is, and you'd have to kind of put it together and figure out, but
Right.
I obviously had, at some level our paths crossed as a coach or whatever it was, um, and they've always been very appreciative and kind. And it's great to your point to see particularly when they've stayed playing the game that you might have been supporting them in, and they've come to love the game and play it as adults just for fun, or have played it in college or what have you. So it's a good journey. Coaching is a really special thing to do.
It is because you're actually, if you're a real good coach, you're teaching life even more than whatever the sport is. I had a guy who coached. He was a goalie on my hockey team and a catcher on the baseball team, and he ended up being a hairdresser. It was the total opposite you would have ever thought.
That's
But
great.
he was fantastic and loving it, and so it is truly fulfilling when you see what they've done and what they're doing and all that and they remember. So kind of like Mr. Holland's Opus in a way.
Mhm.
Never seen that movie. So with all that said, what were you like as a kid or a teenager? Were you the
Mm.
lemonade stand guy? Was it sports also, music?
Yeah,
What?
it's so funny. You had sent me some things to think about, and I was thinking about this prior to our conversation. Growing up in Dallas, I was a soccer player. I was a goalie, actually, myself,
Hmm.
and pretty aggressive one, apparently, at that. Soccer was just getting, let's see here, at that time, soccer was getting a foothold in the country. And I came to find out later when I was coaching soccer years later in California that I actually grew up in the area where the National Soccer Organization was just getting started. And I was, maybe 5 minutes away. So
Wow.
it's kind of cool to make that connection. But played soccer as a kid, loved it, and then spent a lot of time riding my BMX bike around with other kids who are riding their BMX bikes around, and we'd go and go jump things. And crazier kids that I knew would like put leaves in their spokes and light them on fire and start
Oh,
fires and
God.
stuff, stupid stuff. But yeah, so that was me, that traditional kind of Gen X latchkey kind of kid cruising around and having a good time. And then when I moved to back to Marin. Um,
You
I
got the
was there for
electric bikes instead of those.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's where the mountain bike was invented, was in Marin. But at
Oh,
that point in time, I wasn't riding my bike as much, and as a high school kid, I did all kinds of different things. Wound up spending a lot of time doing. We had a professional theater located at our school,
huh.
and so I got into stage management and production of various things. And then I
Cool.
was also involved. I was the president of all three of the high schools in the school district. We were an advisory board and did a big, huge dance and different things. And then kind of towards my later time in high school, I wound up going into going clubbing a lot in San Francisco, sneaking out, going out dancing till all hours of the morning. And then at the end of my high school career, I actually wound up really getting into the Grateful Dead and wound up going to a number of Dead shows and
Wow.
reggae shows and that kind of thing. So I had a kind of a mix and as a kid.
Love the
Yeah,
reggae. I love the reggae. That's cool. So what was
yeah.
your favorite dance?
I'm sorry.
What was your favorite type of dancing?
Oh gosh, that's, I like dancing generally. And they're very different. It's one thing to be at a dead show and you've got, thousands of people who have all ingested various things and are in different states of mind and but everyone's feeling really positive and really, really good. And, the dancing's a lot more mellower and kind of in the flow. And but if you're in a club in San Francisco and, maybe you've had a beer or two and you're 16 years old and, it's 2 in the morning and there's, deep drum and bass and all kinds of techno music going on, it's a little bit of a different vibe. Lots of fun, but just different. So I don't think I have one type of dance that I like.
I think that's great. I ask people what type of music they like the best, and I'm finding more and more like more than two, three, four types, which is I think is great. You can like jazz and heavy metal and everything in
Yeah.
between. And why wouldn't you like it? Because
Yeah.
you don't want all the same thing all the time, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Sunday morning you may want Sarah McLachlan or somebody
Yeah.
or
Right.
jazz,
Yeah.
and then
Exactly.
Sunday night something else.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
well, I know you mentioned you went to UC Santa Cruz, I think, right? Philosophy, was it?
Yeah. I studied philosophy. I had been recruited once upon a time to go to the USC film school when I was right out of college or high school rather.
Hmm.
And I wound up going to USC, but I switched my major and started studying Eastern philosophy.
Mm.
And while there, I got a job at a very famous New Age bookstore called the Bodhi Tree Bookstore, which is now no longer, but was very famous back in the day. And And then I learned that I didn't want to study Eastern philosophy in a Western academic environment. It was just something that I was interested in. And so I changed my major, left USC, which was very expensive
Yeah.
at the time. It probably still is.
Oh, yeah.
And then transferred via a couple different community colleges in order to get to UC Santa Cruz, at which point I studied Western philosophy. And I was interested in ontology. Philosophy has different, epistemology, ethics, logic. My interest was in ontology and around authenticity and agency. And then I worked at another New Age bookstore in Santa Cruz and yeah, did that and really enjoyed it quite a bit. I thought I was going to become a professor of philosophy and realized after I bumped into a TA of mine, he was a Nietzsche scholar and I was studying Nietzsche along with some other
Hmm.
Germans anyway. And he was a brilliant, brilliant guy and was having a lot of difficulty finding a job at that time. The market was very difficult. And I realized, again, it wasn't something that I wanted to do professionally. It was just more of a personal interest. So I changed course and I became a book publisher for a while. But then the .com thing blew up in 1998, 99, where I live. We're very close to Silicon Valley for people who don't know where Capitola is. Um, and I jumped into a startup and did that, and that's
So
how I got into tech.
and which is cool. And we'll come back to that. There's something to be said for, people talk about the arts and liberal schools and this and that. There's something to be said for a balance, and that's always the problem, right? Extremes go all the time. A balance of some of the stuff you studied, like authenticity, how that relates to you now, and just how to be. It's type of courses to match business to make there should be a combination. It doesn't have to go extreme, make a ton of money, or extreme, everything's philosophical and you can't make any money and type
Right.
of deal and live.
No,
So I really appreciate
spot on.
how you did that and how you applied it because I think it's important and I think we need to have both of those for an interesting life at the
Yeah, agreed.
minimum,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
type of thing. So you kind of you were alluding to it there. You were trying to go ahead of me, which you're not supposed to do that.
Yeah, sorry.
What does somebody say? It's my show, not your show, or something like that. But so you kind of began in sales quite a bit, right? And I noticed consultancy, I would call it was almost like seemingly knocking and trying to knock down the door while you were in sales. But that's usually the best salesperson who's really a consulting person. So you began in that. Are there any experiences or inflection points that stand out for you and impact they had on you?
In terms of, just to make sure I understand, as when I was in software sales, is that what you're speaking to?
Yeah, and even in your beginning of your career, you had a couple of sales opportunities you were working on and consulting. Um, in that period when you just started with some of those companies, what did you learn? What experiences happened maybe that impacted you? You know?
Sure. Well, it's interesting. One of the things that actually became very helpful in my sales career was my study of ontology. Because again, ontology is the study of being, namely, how do you describe things and, what is the nature of things? It's the big, heady stuff. And when I was selling enterprise software, um, to understand how software, how to say this, software can dictate entirely how an organization is run, as opposed to the other way around, where the organization runs and software is supposed to help it. So when you start to allow software systems to take over how you execute your business, there's a certain loss of agency around, choice, because then you wind up having to be within the confines of how the software designer designed the system.
Right.
And so the systems that we were selling, these are very high end, enterprise level resource planning systems, accounting and warehousing and purchasing and all of the integrated things. It touched every aspect of a business. The company I was working for, the software I was selling was software that made software. It was extraordinarily sophisticated in its elegance and its simplicity. And we were competing, selling against other systems that were more hard coded kinds of systems. It was use it or lose it kind of functionality.
Hmm.
And what became fascinating is that organizations will want to run that the way they want to run because they understand their customers, they understand their marketplace, they understand their pricing strategies, they understand all of their secret sauce elements. And if a software system restricts them in that, they'll do workarounds on the software. And it becomes very expensive because you do some things over here, but then you have a spreadsheet over there for this other thing because the software doesn't support it, et cetera. So anyway, what became interesting was as soon as I understood this from an ontological perspective, from a selling perspective, I had the skills to be able to communicate that to my customers, prospects at the time. And these were million, I mean, this was a typical deal was worth $2 to $3 million over the course of maybe 4 or 5 years, some much more, some 10, 15
Sure.
million. So, it's real money in terms of, what we were selling, but these companies were 100 million a year in revenue, 400 million a year in revenue, and little tiny ways of execution, course correction execution could result in all kinds of margin. It was very real dollars. So anyway, all of this to say that I found my ontological training, I was able to explain this and demonstrate this to people, and we were able to win software deals as a result. So I don't know if that's
No,
super
I actually
intuitive.
love that. It kind of goes back to what we just said. There's so much value in that. You actually had a differentiation as a salesperson versus the person that didn't have that background. And I don't
Exactly.
think we value that enough versus just sales type of thing.
Yeah, I don't remember, I can't cite the specific examples, but I do know anecdotally that at one point in time, IBM in particular and or other companies found that they wanted to move away from hiring undergraduates that had more technical training, like marketing or what have you. And they wanted to find people more who were humanities, not necessarily philosophy, but
Mhm.
literature, or poetry, or art, or whatever it might be. Um, because the humanities majors had been taught how to think and how to articulate themselves and how to have clear ideas in a sense. Not to say that others don't by any means, but
Sure.
it's just the nature of when you're in these kinds of discussions in a class and you're sharing ideas or perspectives, and then you have to again articulate that in a paper or what have you. You just exercise different muscles.
Let's
And they
just,
found that the business people found that they could bring in a humanities major and then train them on the specifics of the business unit or the thing that they wanted them for. But they couldn't train them to think that way unless they had.
or as Maya Angelou would say, people always remember how you made them feel.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then they'd probably hear you more
Yeah,
if you did make them feel that way. And it's sports teams do that. Obviously, they look for the talent, but the differentiation is the character, the resilience, the common sense, the ability to work, be in a team. Things all things that sound so obvious, but the human element's not. It's complicated and simple both at the same time. And
absolutely.
so I love that as a differentiator, and it seemed like compassion was always in your heart, based on what I've read and talking to you, and became more so where you founded benevolently. That's a long word,
Mhm.
by the way,
Yep.
and
Humanize.
humanize, right?
Yep. Yep.
Maybe if I said it in French, I'd be able to do it. Let's see. So what were you thinking then? What was the vision then?
Yeah.
And if you can also share about why you had a passion in that and the challenges, why you had a passion even about the challenges and using tech to achieve your goals and so on.
Sure. Yeah. Um, well, as I mentioned, when I was in undergrad, I mean, getting my college degree, I had been working at these new age bookstores. And at the
Which, by the
time,
way, I love that too. I mean, there's something about bookstores,
yeah,
So,
bookstores are the best. Yes.
sorry,
And
sorry to
independent
interrupt.
bookstores. Oh, that's okay. And there were multiple times when people would come into the store, genuinely in a crisis. I had one person I remember one time very clearly. She came into the store and she walked up to the front desk where I happened to be and said, I'm looking for something inspirational and I never come into stores like this. It's like, okay. in my mind, I'm like, I wonder what inspirational is, and I wonder what she means by a store like this, and why is she in it now? Like, what's behind this statement?
Right.
Didn't say anything, and I walked her over to, of course, because we're a new age bookstore, our inspiration book section, and started pointing out various books, the ones that we'd sold more of, and just a couple of the titles that I had known about. Of course, you don't know all the books in a bookstore, but just doing my normal book selling thing. And I look over, and she's tears are just streaming from her face.
Well,
And of course, it's, oh my goodness, what can I, and before I could really say anything, she just said he didn't mean to do it. And I said, I'm sorry, what do you mean by that? And she said, he didn't mean to do it. And that's all. And it was clear she was in a very different place and was not able to meet me where in terms of me asking her random questions, it wasn't appropriate at that time. She just needed to be where she was. So I can't remember what I said, but I pointed a few things out to her, and went back, and she bought some things, and that was that. She wound up becoming an ongoing customer. And I'd found out later that the day that she had seen me asking me for books that were inspirational, the night before, her son had been at a concert and pulled out a knife and killed two people by stabbing them in the parking lot.
oh my God.
And here was the mother the next day starting that process. So I never asked her, and I just saw her coming in over the years and got to know her, and it was clear that she found a group of people, and she found some authors that she liked, and you could tell she had been transformed. So it was one of those things where, and it wasn't about me. I just happened to be, in the place where she was arriving at that time. It could have been any other person, but I had been given the privilege and honor to
Yeah.
be in that space to see it. So it was just one of those spots of just like, this is good. This is good work that we're doing. This is good to provide this kind of material to people at the time, which was not difficult, but it wasn't readily available in a lot of places. Subsequently, years and years later, of course, this kind of material is all over the place. You can get, these kinds of things everywhere, which is good.
But it's
But at
not the
that time,
same
it wasn't.
atmosphere.
No, it's exactly right. It's not the same atmosphere. And we had a cafe, and again, we'd have book signings and so forth. And it was a community. It was a third space, right? It was a place where people could come and be with each other, regardless of, the kinds of things that they were interested in. So that carried through just in the sense of the concept of right livelihood and the concept of knowing that I can earn a living and live in the world, but at the same time do so in a fashion that's got an additional value and benefit to the people that I'm trying to do something for.
Yeah, I love it. And it could even be something like leaders who care. Uh,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly. It's
whatever.
it's just a question of, promoting and supporting, principles of care, quite frankly. And by care, I mean very specifically the things that promote the parasympathetic nervous system of rest and digest. That's what I mean by that, but that's a different discussion. So anyway, fast forward. You asked me about benevolently and humanize. So I had this opportunity to travel in 2019 to go with my wife's 12th grade class, which is a class that comes from a school called Mount Madonna School, which is located at a 400-acre retreat and intentional community center, and an intentional community and retreat center, rather. And there's a K through 12 school there, and it's a yogic basis, a yogic principle underlying everything. Anyway, her class she teaches is a philosophy and ethics class, essentially called Values and World Thought. And the class had been invited at that time. It was the fifth time, but it was an invitation by the Dalai Lama to go to his private residence in Dharamshala, India, and to talk to him about the nature of secular ethics.
Wow.
And obviously an incredible privilege. And so I had the opportunity to travel and support the class as they did that. Had the opportunity to meet the Dalai Lama just very briefly. And it was transformative. I hadn't been to India before, and so forth. So anyway, I came back and realized that I wanted to get back to a right livelihood construct and doing something and work in that way. And at the time, there was a lot of growing division. The presidency had just changed from Obama to Trump, and things had just started to change a little bit. And I was concerned that people were becoming more and more divided and that there needed to be a place to bring people back together.
Mm.
So looking at it from that perspective, the goal was how do you create practices of compassion in a sense, or I should say, how do you bring compassion into the world and make it explicit and tangible? And so Benevolently was a platform for acts of altruism. And the goal was to lean into the neuroscience of empathy and compassion because it's a thing, and to be able to then turn that into a way in which people can take action and cultivate these practices of compassion and empathy for themselves, which ultimately includes self-compassion, but ultimately arrives at, just bringing a frame of an emanation, if you will, in the world for people who are feeling good and wanting to help people. And a lot of young people today, in my experience, they have a deep desire to help people, but they don't know what the Rotary is, for instance, or any of the, traditional service clubs, and or, a fair number of people are, according to the research, aren't attending church as much, and they're not connecting there, for instance. So
Right.
how do you provide opportunity? So the goal was to do benevolently inside enterprise organizations in a walled garden. So it wasn't an open platform, but it was a specialized thing just for that particular company, where the people and their friends and the people that work there and their friends and their family and vetted third parties would be able to, nonprofits rather, would be able to provide opportunities to both receive support or give support within this community. So that was benevolently.
Amazing. Now we need it even more, which leads to, I mentioned the word care before, and I love um, what you call the ROI of Care framework. And I know you founded Flourishingly
Yep,
and Compassion. Crazy words. What were you thinking?
I
Um,
wasn't.
I mean, come on.
I was deluded.
And care is even more prevalent there. And before I ask you this question, and you talk about books, one of my favorite books of all time is Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, and that there's meaning in every single thing out there, good, bad, or otherwise, for different reasons, and there's care in that also, to find meaning. Can you share about what ROI of Care framework means to an entrepreneur, even to a corporate
Sure,
executive, where they think, even when I started Leaders Who Care, is like caring that's too intimate for business?
sure. Well, it's interesting. I think that there's a couple dynamics that are happening. The first of which is um, the volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity in the world, or what people are now calling VUCA, which is a special, from what I understand, it's a military term that the special forces use to describe their theater of operations.
Hmm.
Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Very difficult. And the world is becoming more VUCA-like, right? I mean, we think about environmental activities or crises, COVID, AI, growing political and social divisions, inflation, all kinds of different things that are happening. Those things are creating a lot of unknowns and they're uprooting what we're familiar with. And they're creating what we would perceive as threat according to our nervous system.
Hmm.
And the nervous system is scanning for threat constantly through the amygdala. And when it finds threat, it activates the sympathetic nervous system, which results in a fight, a flight, a freeze, or a fawn response of some sort. It's to protect ourselves. It's just our body's defenses to be able to, is the lion going to come get me? But as I understand it, and I am nowhere near a neuroscientist by any stretch of the imagination, but from what I've read and what I've been told, we're scanning our environments for these threats now constantly. And so with the VUCA in the world, it's elevating people's responses, their stress responses, their threat responses. And the system has only been designed really like if you see the tiger, you're normally just resting and digesting, but when you see the tiger, the sympathetic nervous system fires up and you go turbo, and instantly you run away, you run up the tree, and then you hide or whatever it is you're going to do. Tiger goes away, and then you come back down the tree and the sympathetic nervous system shuts down. You have these spikes. But what's happening, as I can tell, is that we're actually now low grade, always on, and people are stressed.
Yep.
And when they're stressed, there's less tolerance, and they're less willing to work with each other or be with each other, and they're more willing to name call and blame. Then people go to work, and work piles on even more because work there's demands, and the organization is in this world of VUCA, and markets are changing, product is changing. How is AI changing things? So
Hmm.
everybody involved generally is really surfing this wave of the sympathetic nervous system. But when you're in that way and you're distracted with those things, your cognitive load is being eaten up by threat, scan, and response. And in so doing, you're not activating what happens when you're in the rest and digest state where you're relaxed and everybody around you is a part of the same group, same team, and you trust everybody. When you're in that state, you relax and you start to think creatively.
Right.
You have greater functions available to in your brain that are no longer being occupied by what the amygdala is doing to the brain. You can get to being creative, you can ideate, you have better relationships, you want to solve problems, all of those things. Now, the parasympathetic nervous system is activated when it's safe or when there's a culture of care that's being applied, where the company genuinely is concerned about the well-being, not just well-being in a health sense, but in a much larger sense. They're generally concerned about their people and they want to wrap them in care, so to speak. And then the neurobiology tells us, well, you go into rest and digest. And as soon as you do that, you're now thinking better, you're now relating better, you're now empathizing with your customers on a deeper level. And all of those things translate into more financial benefits for the organization. This isn't, it's simple. And when you're not in that state and you're in a threat state, you're shut down and you're not thinking clearly and you don't trust people. And that's going to show up in the bottom line as well. So the ROI of care is just to acknowledge that this isn't about care like let's hold hands and throw flowers at each other, which is, sure, that's fun to do. But this is about actually understanding how to manage and develop the nervous system states, be it sympathetic or parasympathetic. And it's just better business to have people in the parasympathetic nervous system.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. It's the reason why we have mental health issues. It's the reason why we have more physical health issues. I mean, stress causes inflammation. I'm not a doctor by any means, but it does. You can almost feel it when it's happening, and and it's not comfortable. It's not fun. And I think COVID probably expanded that more. The brain said that being home is a safe place to be. Don't go anywhere, type of thing. Just talk on. It's safer talking on Zoom. It's fascinating stuff, and like you said, it's simple. What does flourishingly and compassion do? What is there
What are
something
we
you
doing?
get involved in?
Yeah, so Compassion 2.0 is setting up what we're calling a mastermind community for something called Chief Flourishing Officers. And flourishing is is a construct that measures resonance. And resonance is between individually, you have resonance unto yourself and resonance unto other. And organizationally, organizations have resonance unto them itself, namely all of the people, and its others, namely its stakeholders or the environment or the physical community where an organization might be operating, whatever it is. So there's this principle of resonance that goes through individually and organizationally. And the chief flourishing officer is the one that understands two things. They understand first how to create cultures of care through scientifically validated practices and interventions, and combining that with policies and procedures and so forth, excuse me, to create these cultures of care or safety. Google's Project Aristotle was a precursor to this. And for those listeners that don't know, look up Google's Project Aristotle, where they did a deep analysis on what made their top teams tick. And after looking at 175 of their top performing teams from all over the organization, they found that there were five elements. And the largest element was something called psychological safety. So when people felt safe, they perform better. And anyway, it was a landmark, not landmark, but pioneering thing that
Hmm.
Google did. They were
Love
brilliant
it.
that way. Anyway, check it out. So, chief flourishing officers know how to implement cultures of care, and then that ladders up into the ROI of care so that they can understand and articulate, the chief flourishing officer can articulate to other leadership, this is the strategic and tactical reasons why we want to be doing this. Um, and then Flourishingly is the platform that we're developing, an AI based platform that is the platform that implements this work for the chief flourishing officer to be able to look at the dashboards and measure resonance in an organization.
Man, as an executive search guy, love the fact that there's a chief flourishing officer out there. We've been talking about chief well-being officers for a long time, and it is good for business. It's absolutely good for business for attracting and developing and retaining your people. And then, I'm involved with an organization called it's Tower Capital. They talk about generational health. It's right in that whole thing that you're sharing about. Yeah, we may need to. I got a couple more questions. We may need to have to do a sequel, as they say in LA. We got to keep them wanting more, so we can do a sequel on that topic alone. I did want to ask you a couple more questions.
Sure,
You
feel free.
mentioned AI, and you talked before about how software takes over companies back when. Well, hey, here we go with AI potentially taking over companies in different ways. What's your thought about the balance of humanity and tech slash AI as to how it's going to be affecting everything?
Yeah, that's a little question.
Yeah.
I think that at the macro level, any technology that's ever been built is to create leverage, anything. And that includes a hammer, it includes any simple machines, anything. It's been to make humans' lives have less work involved in it in some way. Now, that's a broad statement. I'm sure there's exceptions, but generally speaking, that's what we've done.
Hmm.
Now, there's also this argument too that says, well, anytime a new technology is created, and even though it might eradicate old technologies like, buggy whip manufacturers, as an example, those people will become auto mechanics. Okay, might be some truth to that.
Or the sex shop with
I'm sorry.
buggy whip, or the sex shop with the
Yeah,
buggy whip.
exactly. Different options, different career paths for sure.
Right.
Um, but AI, I don't know if that's true. Now, the other thing that's also interesting at a macro level, and I'm not trained in any of this, this is just my random perspective on these things, is that when you look at the demographics of what's happening across the world and population growth and decline, really mostly, as I understand it, most of the countries in the world are on will be in some sort of decline and or radical decline over the course of time.
Hmm.
So as there are less people being born and ultimately less humans on the planet, which as I understand is inevitable right now at scale,
Right.
then AI coming in and doing some additional work, maybe there's a symbiosis there in that relationship. I'm not sure. I think at a micro level, well, let me back up. At a macro level, still AI will take out any work that humans are doing now that AI can do. AI will do it. I mean, I just don't, regardless if that's right or wrong, I think that's just going to be what's going to happen. When it comes to the micro level of this, for a given organization, they will apply that principle to their organization to create efficiencies and so forth. But then it also then begs the question, then if you are having AI do things that AI can do, then you need to have things that people can do that only people can do. And you
Right.
want them to be the best group of people possible. And in order to do that, you want to have cultures of care so that you can actualize all of their capabilities and to
100%.
be able to ideate and create and do all these different things and also use the tool of AI or the platforms of AI to support that as well. So I think there's going to be some very interesting hybridizations as long as we don't continue to treat humans like they're, in an industrial aged factory assembly model of people doing tasks. They need to be leaned into. And I think the other side of that too is younger people, millennials and Gen Z for sure, basically are demanding this. I mean, they don't tolerate the way the conditions were like you and I when we were coming up. It's a different day. So anyway, those are some thoughts.
No, that's it's brilliant, and I mean, anytime something comes in, there'll be good, there'll be evil people or bad people that will try to take advantage of it. But I actually am aligned with what you said there in the sense that I think it could be the technology that finally does have the opportunity to make people happier, doing happier things, and hopefully we're having discussions like this with the executives and entrepreneurs, and hopefully have executives and entrepreneurs somehow finance maybe people that can't be upskilled, doing stuff in their communities to make the community better, rather than them going on unemployment and things getting worse. But that's where I think there's an opportunity to make communities healthier, companies better, keeping money in the pocket of people that'll buy stuff from the companies. Because that's what tech was supposed to do in the first place, make us happier. And this may be the one that actually gets to that point. So I love
Agreed.
your line of
And
thinking.
to build on your point there too, it's also at the very least right now begging the question of if AI is this, then what does it mean to be human? And I think that will bring forward questions around not only what does it mean to be human, but what does it mean to live together and be in relationship together in communities and doing these various things.
It
You know,
makes me go full circle to, and that's why I love having these discussions, to what we said was maybe some of the most fulfilling things we've ever done was coaching the kids and doing all that stuff. And the feeling is incredible when you're doing that. And that's what we want to do, that type of thing. So brilliant stuff. So the last question, after the pandemic, a client told me, it was 2020, he said, Mark, that was the year that flew by slowly, he told me.
Mhm. Mhm.
And even to this day, it feels to a lot of people like it was yesterday and 5 years ago at the same time. With all that said, what are you most grateful for and what are you most hopeful for?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think the thing that I'm most grateful for is as I've gotten to be older, I'm 54 now, and as I've, gotten into my 50s, um, I've come to more gratefully appreciate the very, very simple things, and the deep, beautiful things in my life, including my friendships and mostly my family and my wife and my children. And a big part of that is having had the opportunity these past couple of years. I've been doing a lot of somatic work and just becoming more and more present into what it means to be, human. And to your point about, the coaching, for instance, it's that human connection, it's that field of human relationship that is felt. It's not thought about or talked about per se, but it's actually felt. And I think that's the thing that as that I get older and I become much, much more aware of the nuance and the subtleties of that. I'm very grateful for that awareness, I guess, at this
Yeah.
point in my life. Because I didn't carry that when I was younger, but I am now, and that feels good.
Well, they say youth
Um,
is wasted on the young. So,
yeah, pretty much.
what are you most hopeful for?
Yeah, I would say it gets back to what you were just speaking to about, um, this discussion around AI and so forth. I think that things are challenging right now. There's a lot of fear right now, and that's showing up in some policies and frameworks politically. There's a lot of concern right now, and I think that's going to give way. I think it's a forcing function on us to say, what exactly are we doing here?
Yeah.
What are we doing here? And how is it? What does it mean to flourish? One of the things that we talk about is that flourishing is not a noun; it's a verb. And flourishing is not something to obtain, it's actually already here. It's just a question of how deeply resonant is the concept of flourishing. And we also know that there is no singular definition of flourishing. There are 8+ billion definitions of flourishing on the planet based on everybody's lived experiences. So mine and yours and theirs and hers and all the different people, they have their different ideas. But everybody understands that there is flourishing. And I think I'm hopeful for the fact that beyond dogmatic religion or dogmatic political beliefs broadly or any of these things, that we can settle into this frame of flourishing by embracing the concept that everybody has their own version, and to let people live, and to, and how to say, have those fulfilling lives based on how it is that they feel is in alignment for them. So I'm hopeful that maybe that'll start to come forward more, but fingers crossed.
Those two. Um, no, that's brilliant. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful for a new friend.
Yeah, me too. Grateful to know you know.
And and that you are a leader who cares, and for real, because you're involved in that. And I think I'm hopeful for the same thing. And I think we got to keep the conversation going so we can help lead it that way. So thanks for being that, and thanks for sharing on the Leaders Who Care series. I
Yeah, well, thank you for
really,
having me, and thanks for doing the series too. It's fantastic.
no, my privilege.